Thank you for joining us. We are here on location at the Orange County Convention Center in Orlando, Florida for the FETC conference. The future of education is a cause today that is greater than ever, and we will get in-depth opinions and views on this subject matter following these messages.
We started with a blank slate, and then we added you, because you wanted a tablet that felt perfect in your hands, dual cameras so you can capture everything. You wanted Beats audio, and a tablet that runs Android, the most popular mobile operating system in the world. Introducing the Slate 7 from HP, the game-changing 7-inch Android tablet. Because for you, getting it exactly right matters.
With us now is Tom Whitby. Hi, Tom. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank
Tell
you
us
for
about
having me
yourself here.
Well, I'm here at FETC, which was originally the, I think it was the Florida Education Technology Conference. Now they've changed it to the Future of Education and Technology Conference, which is a significant change. But we're here in Florida with several thousand educators talking about technology in education and how it's affecting things. Where I come from, I'm pretty much at this point in time, I'm a retired educator, 40 years in the classroom, both working from middle school into high school, and I did 6 years as a professor in higher ed, and all the time in the classroom. So I've been working with students and with teachers in educating and professional development for teachers. What I do now is I'm involved very much in social media and using social media as a means of professional development for teachers to become what we refer to as connected educators. The idea of connected educators is to break down the barriers of both time and space so that teachers can connect and collaborate at any time, at any place with educators around the world. And that's the idea that will get us into the 21st century and out of the 19th and 20th century that where we were restricted by buildings and restricted by classrooms.
Excellent. Now you mentioned social media. What are some of the platforms that you're referring to?
When we refer to social media, there are several platforms that enable teachers, not teachers, anybody, to engage in discussion and to collaboratively learn. The idea of collaborative learning is one that is moving into what we do. We've always had collaboration, but collaboration in the past has always had to be face-to-face. In order to collaborate, you had to be in the same space as the person with whom you would want to collaborate. Technology has moved that forward in that we no longer have to worry about that space. You and I can collaborate, you being in Florida and me being in New York, we can collaborate at any time by using technology. And we could use Google Hangouts, we could use Skype, we could use Twitter, we could use LinkedIn, we could use even bookmarking sources like Delicious or any sources that enable us to contact each other and engage. So that's the social media that we're talking about. Probably the backbone for developing any PLN. A PLN would be a personal learning network. A network of people that help guide my personal learning would not be the same people that would help guide your personal learning. So a PLN, personal learning network, would be different for everybody, kind of like a snowflake. There are no two that are alike. And when educators engage in developing their own learning, they take ownership of that learning and it becomes a much more meaningful thing. Collaborative learning enables us to learn in a much deeper level than if we were being lectured to or by using direct instruction. So the idea of collaboration has moved up the scale of acceptance for methodology in education.
Interesting. I see a parallel between the type of learning that you're referring to, this collaborative learning using technology and social media. I see a parallel between that type of learning and the type of pedagogy that teachers are expected to facilitate within their classrooms. What do you think about not only the teachers learning the content and the pedagogy, but also bettering themselves in their facilitation of that in the classroom?
as teachers, one of the pitfalls in education is that when educators think about becoming educators, they know that they have to go to school. So they get their degree, and then they get their license, and then they get a job. And then many of them say, this is it, I've accomplished what I had to accomplish, and they sit back and think, this is going to carry me through life. Well, it doesn't.
Not anymore.
The idea that information changes so rapidly and increases at such a rate that in order to stay relevant, we have to be connected. If in fact, and we talked about this before, if in fact, as an educator, if I've got a class of students in front of me and I give them all of the knowledge in my head, I am limiting them to what it is they should have access to. They need access to all that information that is constantly changing, and they need the skills to access that information. They need the skills to analyze that information, to critically analyze that information, and the skills to create other information to exchange out for collaboration. Those are the 21st century skills that we talk about.
And the tools to do that too. So
and the tools are constantly changing.
yes.
I received a master's degree in educational technology, and all of the hardware and all of the software that I learned on to attain that degree no longer exists. So in order for me to stay relevant, I need to be connected with the very people that are doing the things that I'm doing, so I can gain from them whatever successes that they've had, and I can avoid the failures that they've experienced.
I've attended several workshops already, and the information is overwhelming. But I feel that, as educators, we owe it to our students. We owe that to them to stay on that cutting edge.
That's, what you're saying right
Yes.
now is one of the biggest deterrents to educators becoming connected. Because one of the things, I often say that the worst advocates for connected educators are connected educators. They tend to get very excited about their connection. They get excited about their collaboration. And when they're talking to unconnected educators, they tend to overwhelm them with all of their successes. And an unconnected educator listening to this is intimidated and overwhelmed by all of that information that's being thrown at them, and they say, I'll never do this in a million years, so let me just stay away from it. But we have to find a way to connect those unconnected educators, because the discussions that we have as connected educators are 6 months to a year in advance of the discussions that are going on in faculty rooms and faculty meetings, because the thought leaders in education, the authors of educational books right now, are involved in being connected. They're leading the way with their ideas. And in social media, titles are non-existent. People are accepted for their ideas. The ideas are the things that are examined, not the credentials of the people
Sure.
putting them forward. And it also gives a great deal of transparency to the problems of education and to the solutions of those problems. So social media has enabled the educator to get back into the national discussion on reform that was hijacked from them by business people and by politicians who really have no idea what they're talking about in education.
By the way, we're here in a public place at FETC, so I apologize for any background noise.
It's nice to be able to do something like that in a public place, because other people are actually listening to our conversation as we go on.
This is true. So you talk about how these connected educators are 6 months ahead. Mm-hmm. And 6 months nowadays is a long time.
Yeah, it is. I mean, to give you a more specific example, some of the things that we've been talking about for 2 years now, the flipped classroom.
Yes.
And the people who wrote the books on the flipped classroom, John Bergman, for instance, being one of them, they were people who were on Twitter, and they were connected educators, and we were talking about the very thing that he then wrote a book about. When we go back 5 or 6 years, when people first started using Twitter for connecting, many of those people went from microblogging, which is what Twitter is, to blogging, and now they're some of the biggest authors in education.
Wow.
And they're still involved with Twitter. It kind of puts everybody on the same level, so you can have a Twitter conversation with people who are authors in the field. And it's something that's never been afforded teachers prior to the technology enabling that to happen.
Interesting. Yeah, I saw Mr. Bergman. He's pretty amazing.
Yes.
His workshop was fantastic.
Great guy.
What can we do to get more educators involved in that personal learning?
Being connected?
Being connected.
It's a difficult problem because our easiest access is to connected educators, and we sometimes think, let's just talk about connected education and everybody in the world will jump on board. Well, the only people that are jumping on board are the connected educators, because that's who we're getting to. We have to find a way to get to the unconnected educator. They're not people who are on Twitter. They're not people who are using Google Hangouts. They're people who are watching TV, possibly reading journals, probably many of them not engaging in anything that moves them beyond the professional development that's delivered to them by their schools. Unfortunately, professional development being delivered by schools is not relevant professional development. The big problem with it is that oftentimes, more often than not, the school will bring somebody in to talk about the bells and whistles of software, rather than engaging the educator and saying, what is it you do with your class, and how can technology be brought in to make you more efficient and more effective in accomplishing your goals?
Sure, because I understand that a lot of the pedagogy is staying the same, despite the fact that teachers are using some of the technology. I think the mindset of this, 21st century learning and critical thinking and project-based learning is not happening at the rate that we would like it to.
Well, when we talk about bringing technology into a classroom, we have to understand that we are teaching generations of kids who are not going to live in our world. Our world, for educators, they have a choice as to whether or not to use technology to some extent now. It is actually permeated the lives of all of us, so there are some things that we don't have choices in. But the kids that we're educating today are going to need to communicate, and they're going to need to create, and they're going to need to collaborate. And the very tools that our society in a computer-driven world will require them to understand, we're not working with.
Right.
And we need to work with those tools and teach kids to utilize those tools for creation and for communication and collaboration, because that's what they will do moving forward. Okay, the idea of the actual hardware and software that they use will change, and it's going to change at a rapid pace. So we have to teach them not only to use what's existing now, but be flexible enough to change as technology changes and relearn what it is they have to relearn. These are all part of the 21st century skills that we talk about when we refer to 21st century skills.
Tom, this is all very interesting and motivating, and I can't wait to get back and share some of the wonderful ideas that I've learned here at FETC, and I thank you so much.
Well, you're so welcome. Thank you for having me.
I appreciate it.
It's a pleasure to be connected with somebody online and then to meet them face to face. This
wonderful
connection, the idea of connecting has enabled a whole other level at these conferences, so that you can have a relationship with people and then actually meet them for the first time later on. And it's like we're old friends.
We've known each other for a long time.
That's exactly right. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Tom.